Also, there's a thing with workflow. Normally, what happens when we have these files, which both have HTML and code in them, is that we wait for the HTML to be developed. Then we give that HTML file to the programmer. The programmer then puts in code. And then by the time he's done with the code, the designers come back and say, hey, we need to change something. And it's no longer an HTML file, like I said, they can't change it, so you have to do it. Right? Since you're now the one doing changes to lay out things, the code that you were supposed to be doing will be late because you're doing other things that you shouldn't really do initially. Also, if instead we could separate it into two files, it would be possible, one guy does the HTML while another guy at the same time does the code. Doesn't always work exactly like that, but it makes it much more easier. Clearly, you can say this takes much longer time. And if you have to deliver something for a client, they're always impatient. They want the solution yesterday. So it helps your project if you can do it in a shorter, more efficient way. So having it split, you can actually work more easily in parallel. So, I think I have an example here. I don't know, it might be a little hard to see from the back. But this is, I deciphered a table. We have a clear table start at the beginning, and we have some rows, and then we have some PHP in the middle, and all sorts of what? Again, this is the sort of thing that make me here. Because if you give this again to an HTML developer who knows nothing about code, he's gonna break your code, that's for sure, or he's gonna call you. Either way, you're gonna get involved, which you don't want to be if it's a design change. So there are, I think I have a follow-up slide here. Yeah, let me put it like this. A few observations about designers. They're not programmers. They think in pages. They don't think in objects. Programmers like to objectify everything. We like to split things out. And if the same thing is used in several pages, it's definitely only going to be written once. And we then put that in a separate file. So what we end up with is that the final HTML is actually comprised of code that comes from 10 different files. That's the way we programmers like it, because it's nice if we reuse the same logic for the same feature throughout the site and whatnot. It's calming. We like that. Designers do not like that. That's my observation. Because they would like to open a file, their page, and they would like to see all the things that involves the design within that file so they can change it. Because if they have to go digging through 10 different files, they'll be like, where does this go? Where does this part come from? It becomes a detective work to change the HTML. And then the thing about those objects we create is that sometimes the news we show on the front page and the news we show on the other page is technically the same, but layout-wise it's going to be just slightly different. On the front page it might be one font size bigger, or blue instead of gray or something. And we're like, dang! So that's an if clause. Okay. Right, are we on the front page or not? And then, another change happens. And by the end of the project, that little, very beautiful object you had is now in 7 different versions, all depending on is it shown here and is there also this on the page or blah 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 blah. So that's not so nice. So what's important? Layout separation. So news. What has been used? XML has been very popular for doing that. So you generate some PHP, which generates some XML, and then you apply an XSLT style sheet, which generates the final HTML. Yeah, it's a nice tool in theory, but it's so much overkill for HTML. I mean, it's slow. Slow. There's something called Smarty for PHP. Google it. Smarty is a very popular template engine. There are other engines. There's an old one called SlowTemplate. There's, I believe, one in the peer library for PHP as well. And probably many more. It was quite popular at one point to create them. Here's an example of how HTML could look like. As we see, it looks like HTML, but when we look closer, we see that it's not completely HTML. There's something curly bracket, active curly bracket. It's still valid HTML, but probably have suspicion that that might be something else, or href URL. Right. This is some menu rendering, I think. It is. So what we have is a series of links, and they are targeting various things, and they have various URLs, and they might have an active class associated or not. They also have a name. So, if you give this to an HTML developer, it will be easier than the one we saw before. It still has some funny stuff in it, which you have to explain, but it's significantly less. Right. I'm going to show something called SlowTemplate, and this is the concept for it. You have a PHP file. This PHP file is the one receiving requests, and ultimately it's the one answering back. In this case, template 01, whatever. Then we have all sorts of objects and library code and whatnot. You can bring that into this layout, template, whatever we want to call it, and it will bring the functionality. Then we have an HTML file, which is a separate file. And in this case, it's named the same way, .tpl, and it's just HTML as I just showed you. And we bring that in. So the role of this file is to combine the library code, which the layout, the HTML, and then send the response. That's the theory behind it. So let's look at some code. That'll work. Simple. Okay, we bring in the class, SlowTemplate in this case. We create an instance. We tell it what file to use. We will note that the file I'm currently writing is called index.php. So the template is called index.tpl. Then we call something called paths and something called SlowPrint. So this very fantastic HTML file, which I created myself because I'm such a great designer. It has hello world, right? So what have we done is that we created an instance of the template engine. We told it what file to use. We called paths and we called print. And the output, well, not so surprisingly, is the HTML itself. Now, that's of course quite boring, right? If we just wanted to print static HTML files, we would, well, just do that. So let's change it a bit. It's still just HTML, but clearly you can imagine that this name will be replaced with something else. We want to tell it what to replace with. We say the name should be BitMagic, right? And clearly we have Hello World BitMagic. Now we can add more of those, of course. The list goes on. Whatever. Yeah, just whoops, shouldn't blah 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 blah. Okay. Anyway, we have the date here. And so on. Now, that's all very fine, but in many cases you want something to repeat. For instance, if you're building a table or you have a list of something or whatever. So let's look at a different example. This is a little more complex. Let's look at the HTML first. Clearly not that one. Right. Here we have a very important table. It's probably listing, I don't know, all the upcoming events. So we have a table, and we can see that there's an HTML comment in front of each table row and a similar one after it. And whatever is in between those two comments is the row. And in this table, we would like that row to be there, well, for as many times as we have events. And then we down here have something called rows amount, which is probably the amount of rows that we have put in. See the code for that. Again, we bring in the template, we create an instance, we tell it what file to use. Then we have a data array here. This is my database. Right, we have 3 items, as you can see. They have an ID and they have a title or whatever. And I loop through this array, and we are assigning ID to the first element here, and description to the second element. And then we pass rows, and rows, whatever name we have here in the comment. Yeah, let's just take a look at that. So we have the table, and well, we can use source, which probably would be very interesting. Right. So here we can see it, as I said, the table row, which were in between the comments, is repeated once, twice, and 3 times. And we have total amount of rows, 3. Why is that 3 there? Well, in the HTML it just said row amount. In the code, well, we have an amount counter which we increase, and we assign row amount to, well, the amount. Again, we pass print. So, this is the basics. Let me quickly show you a little more complex